Hello, hi everybody. Welcome to our webinar tonight on school refusal, something which you may be experiencing with your own child or a child you're working with. Undoubtedly, this is a huge issue at the moment. It's one being talked about throughout the education industry. So very honored to be doing this with Victoria today. And for those of you that don't know, my name is Paula Barrett. So my background, I started off as an assistant psychologist at the Royal Free in the neurodevelopmental clinic. Since then, I've been a kind of SEN career tutor, yeah, working with neurodivergent children globally. Then got to do my executive function coach training many years ago with Victoria, and have since then headed up the CODE Education. And we are a tuition agency working with very specialized tutors who are executive function aware and work with neurodivergent students predominantly. Um, Excellent. And yes, of course, we're going to hear from Victoria a little bit later in the segment, who you may know heads up Connections of Mind. Okay, so bear with me while I just ensure that I'm sharing my screen. I'm not known for my amazing technical abilities, so just bear with me one moment while I do that. Here we go. Okie dokie. Right. So I think that the first thing we're going to look at are reasons why. Um, oh, let's go back a bit. There we go. Reasons for school refusal. Now, please do let me know, pop any questions in the chat as I'm going along. I can talk very quickly. So anything that you need me to clarify, please let me know. So great. Okay, so the first thing I kind of want to talk about is the importance of executive functions. Now, executive functions, whether your child has met the kind of clinical threshold for a diagnosis, of autism, ADHD, dyslexia, any neurodivergence, or not, they may be experiencing executive function challenges. Now, these, if you don't know, are a set of kind of critical skills in our prefrontal cortex, and they manage kind of nearly every aspect of how to plan and execute a task. We know neurodivergent children do struggle with these, and many children just have EF challenges without having that diagnosis. So I just want you to kind of have that in mind while I'm speaking. Examples of this could be being, flexibility, emotional control, working memory, and just planning and organization. And yeah, a lot of these are one of the reasons behind school refusal or challenges with them. Um, Great. So children often refuse school due to a complex psychological reaction. This is not something that happens overnight at all. It's not like a child one day wakes up and is like, I'm not going to school. I think often the media does depict this kind of lazy, defiant teenager who just, doesn't want to work. We know this is absolutely not the case. I mean, often this is an accumulation of trauma around education. There can be lots of like small negative events that can lead to this absolute kind of shame spiral, resulting in children shutting down and just disassociating from education. And we know this is heightened in neurodivergent children or those with executive function challenges. A very common term is emotional based school avoidance, EBSA. And I think this, again, is such an important point to begin on because often we, yeah, as I said, can view school refusal for a lens of truancy. And until we really, as Brene Brown would say, get in the pit with teenagers, empathize, understand this is not something they're doing due to, wanting to be naughty. This is when we can start to make progress, understand what's going on, and ultimately find a solution. Okay. Right. So number one, one of the key reasons for school refusal, or one of the things that can begin the cycle of kind of emotional dysregulation, is the heightened sensory overload for neurodivergent students. So this can be anything. This can be the constant noise in the classroom. This can be the bells ringing, chairs scraping, bright lights. It can be the feel of their school uniform. Like, these are not silly things to be dismissed. These are very, very real. And even the anticipation of this can send students into fight or flight mode. And they themselves might not even be aware that this is the reason they're beginning to feel anxious. I think we've all had a tube journey where we've come off that tube thinking, oh my goodness, how am I going to go into this meeting? And so you can imagine, for a neurodivergent teen, what it's like being in a very overwhelming environment. And of course, when a child enters the lizard brain, we call it, so it's highly anxious, they shut off all their executive functions. So this is a really important thing to consider. Okay, big one. So we already have potentially a very emotionally dysregulated child. So this can unfortunately be kind of amplified by a lack of neuro-inclusive policies within schools. We know there's a lack of funding in education right now, and there's so it is tricky for schools to ensure that they are making these policies as neuro-inclusive as possible. It can vary between schools. Predominantly it's, a lot of inflexibility around deadlines. It can be, lots and lots of timed assessments. It can be things like just failing to implement reasonable adjustments, which is what the laws say that should be kind of done within schools to ensure they're neuro-inclusive. So even the lack of kind of staff training, and it's not allowing children to access the full curriculum. It's essentially marginalizing children because it's very, very much aimed at the neurotypical brain. So this next point, I certainly want to say that, this is not true of, this is a minority. There's so many incredible teachers out there who work incredibly hard to connect with neurodivergent children. But this is again a really big issue. And teenagers, despite a very defiant mask they may wear, very much seek validation from adults, whether that's parents, teachers. They really are social creatures and really desire that people to be understood and to be heard. I often, when I do speak to clients and students, there'll be one or two educators that they're clashing with, and that can be one of the predominant reasons that they're frightened to go into school. And again, especially if the teacher is very traditional and has not had the training on how neurodivergence can manifest in the classroom. This can result in things like, gaslighting and microaggressions, the denial of neurodivergence even existing. Remember, these students can be very, very good at masking. A lot of girls especially can get all the way through university and be diagnosed as adults. So, this will cause, that they can be really struggling to begin with. So shaming from educators can cause almost a physical pain in some of our neurodivergent students. We know that Rejection sensitivity is a big issue. So they will experience a very exaggerated, almost unbearable pain from this kind of criticism, especially in front of their peers. So quite an awful shame spiral can begin. And that's why it's so important that we look at specific praise for these students. Avoid negative reinforcements. Really look at how we're managing behavior. Yeah. And again, a really big one, I think for everyone is navigating interactions with peers. This can become stressful very, very quickly for teenagers. Children, like, my 4-year-old is currently desperately trying to fit in at school by sharing his snacks, really navigating that minefield of socializing. I mean, the fear of social rejection, we know, is huge in children, especially those who might have issues with understanding social cues. And as a result of that, may, be laughed at or isolated or bullied. It can kind of, it can be a really, really big problem. And another thing that adds to this picture, I hope you kind of can see forming of what trauma can look like in an educational setting. Okay. So another really important thing to point out here is no matter how amazing a school is, how well-trained the staff are, how wonderful the friendship group may be, that we still have a national curriculum that is one mold fits all. We're very exam focused. So the academic potential or level of a child is purely based on the outcome, often, of a 1 or 2 hour exam. So you can imagine, like I said before, when you enter that state of anxiety, all executive functions get shut down. And an important one there is working memory, which is a child's ability to hold a question in their mind and at the same time access information from their long-term memory store. So these the way children are assessed is a big problem. In addition to this, there's not really a formal requirement to teach children how to learn, how to revise. As teachers may choose to include that, but metacognition, reflecting on learning, is not that present within the GCSE and A-level curriculums. Also, I mean, one of the most common complaints I experience from parents is, and students alike, is they've been told to go and revise, and they have absolutely no idea where to begin. No idea. And I'm talking kids from the best schools in the country, all the way down to kind of local, any the entire spectrum of schools we have. It's in a very, very common issue. This is another webinar, but there are, 3 golden rules of revision that so many children do not know. Retrieval practice. Don't just write notes, answer questions. Dual coding, using pictures and colors. Interleaving, using various methods. And I could talk, I will do a webinar on this again this year, but I could talk for a long time about how to revise. But this isn't embedded within the curriculum unless the teacher chooses to. So again, there's no way they can showcase their academic potential. Okay. So again, if you consider everything I've talked about, what we can see is a child who is incredibly emotionally dysregulated, stressed, and ultimately just lacking autonomy. And then we see school refusal. So this is, we talk about, this is talking about a complete burnout. They've gone down the shame spiral. And if you do have a child who is going through this, you may see meltdowns after school, really emotionally dysregulated after school, unable to get out of bed, complaints of physical pain. They could be running away from school. So often this then leads to safeguarding issues. So children are feeling unsafe. And so it starts to go beyond just an educational issue, and something which, as parents, it becomes very, very worrying. I mean, this is why the government have passed several laws recently. So the Equality Act, that the school must make reasonable adjustments for neurodivergent children. So yeah, not that long ago that this was put in place. That was updated in 2014, the Children and Families Act, which is that, EHCPs must be used and incorporated in the approach to supporting the child. Now, some of this is a reason why, if you do suspect a diagnosis and an EHCP plan will help. There are laws that, mean that carries a lot of weight for you in arguing the case for your child. So that's really what I wanted to get across in the first portion of this webinar, is that school refusal is not about truancy or laziness, but it is a trauma response. So this is again something which can so easily become more and more traumatic if the school, the child, and parents are not aware of the issues that are happening and why this is happening. So busting the myth about this being related to just pure truancy is very, very important. So the good news is that we are here to talk to you today about other ways that this can be approached. Allowing your child to have more autonomy over their learning, and therefore to thrive is possible. You do not have to follow the traditional route. If you're feeling hopeless, there are many, many different approaches that we can utilize. And obviously, I've talked about, I've got a lot of lived experience in this, anecdotal evidence, but recently, and no doubt due to the huge rise in the number of children learning from home, is that there's now a vast body of research into this. It's shown that it actually can enhance students' engagement and learning interests, as well as happiness, friendships, and other long-term outcomes. So yes, this is something which there are alternative models, and they're not just there's not just anecdotal evidence for this. There's research that really supports this movement, and we have someone with us today who is like an expert on this, and who is going to share a little bit more about her experience. So Victoria, would you like to jump in?
Wonderful. Thank you, Paula. It's so lovely listening to you speaking about all of that. And I was nodding away here on my video off because as you know, I've experienced so many of these things through not only through my daughter, who I'm going to talk about in a minute, but also through the young people that we support at Connections in Mind, and through the code as well. We end up picking up the pieces a lot of the time from children who have, through no fault of their own, fallen out of the school system because it just doesn't suit them and it doesn't suit everyone. But yet parents are made to feel like pariahs, social pariahs, for not getting their children into schools. I want to just talk about my personal experience of that now. It's not something I talk about regularly, but I think it's important to do that. And I have asked my daughter for her permission to share our story this evening. So I hope this resonates with some of you, and that you might get some learnings from it too. So I'm going to share my screen. Super. So I'm going to be talking about our learning from home journey today. And just to go through some of the timescales for my daughter. So she's my eldest daughter, and from 2015 to 2020, from 2020 to COVID, she was in a nurturing school community within our expat community in Uganda, where we lived at the time. At 2020, her school moved online because of COVID. And then in early 2021, we set up a homeschool group group actually in Uganda where we were, school was actually cancelled for 2 whole years. So we set up a homeschooling group to enable the learning to continue. So she'd had a very kind of nurturing time then. Because of my father's illness, we had to move back to the UK in June 2021. And that was when we started to see a reluctance for our daughter going into school. We thought it was just new school nerves, but it lasted for 2 years and kind of culminated in this refusal to go to school. And I use that word very carefully. I know some people find it just challenging, but I do think it is when you do value the autonomy of your child and their ability to make choices in their life, the fact that they are refusing to go to school and that they are making that stand, I think is a positive thing, that we're listening to them and taking on board their opinions and not forcing them to do something. So whilst we did everything we could to enable her to go to school, she did one day just say, no, I'm not going in anymore. And no, you can't tell me, mummy, that I can do hard things, which was my go-to growth mindset phrase. You can do hard things, honey. I'm here to support you. She just said, nope, no more. So of course, we're incredibly concerned. We tried everything we could with the school to help her to attend. But unfortunately, it just wasn't the right setting for all of the reasons that Paula has listed. Just so many ways that school just isn't designed or hasn't evolved, perhaps is a better way of putting it, to serve the needs of our really sensitive neurodivergent young people. So in September 2023, we tried online school, thinking, okay, this would be good. It'd be in her safe space at home and she could learn from home. I'll talk more about that experience. And then in 2024, in January, we tried homeschooling group. And then finally, we settled on self-directed learning last year. And we've had great success with that. I'm going to talk more about that. And currently, we're trying to secure an EHCP to help with her GCSEs, because she does want to take some GCSEs. And that's not something that we feel that we have the expertise to support her with at home. So we're looking at that. So there's just a bit of an overview, and I'm going to talk more about the details of our story now. So, excuse me. So when she was leaving school, it was very clear that she was struggling at school. She would complain about stomach aches, and she would say she didn't want to go in. We would coax her in, using all those kind of growth mindset phrases. But it became really clear that actually she had been masking a lot of the things that she found difficult, like sensory challenges, bullying, actually being bullied by teachers, not in a kind of conscious way, but just being picked on all the time for her little neurodivergent quirks, especially like chatting in class or doodling in her workbook and things like that just helped her to self-regulate that she was picked on. And I use the word bullying very carefully. It is a kind of emotional attack on a young person without that kind of real understanding of the impact that it was having. And so we got to the stage where she just said, you cannot make me go. I'm not going to. So she refused to attend. And then we came to a agreement with the school, because we'd all been quite shocked by this. It kind of all escalated very quickly. We talked to the school and we came to an agreement with the school that I would work just down the road where we live in the middle of the countryside. So it was in a rural pub. And so that I could come and get her at any point if she said that she was feeling unsafe and she wanted to come home. So I did that for about a week and a half. And then there was one particular instance where they were trying their best to help her, and they'd set up a workshop about how to make friends. It was kind of intended for her. She'd, of course, being hypersensitive, she had snagged onto this fact and felt this huge flight response from this, and requested to leave and to call me, and they wouldn't allow her to call me, even though we had agreed that that would be the process. So she was then, of course, completely left without any trust for the school, and I was left without any trust for the school. So we had to end our relationship with the school at that time. There was just nowhere for us to go, because I believe you have to be able to trust that the school will follow through on promises that they have made to you. So that was very sad for all of us. But we then saw a number of months of her kind of unfurling, because she'd become kind of curled up, almost like a little kind of like a little fossil, and kind of curled up to kind of protect herself. And we see that physically, that physicality of school refusal, of school trauma, school distress, quite often. And actually, as she started to kind of relax, she started to unfurl, and her shoulders started to go back, and we could see that physical change as well as the emotional change from her leaving school. So we concentrated on getting her better over the summer, and then in September we enrolled her into an online school, and she tried it. Unfortunately, it was just like school but online, and the teachers are still so mean. And these were some of the sound bites that really stick with me, and you'll see as we go through my slides, I've got all this kind of sound bites that kind of resonate around my head. That's kind of how I encode memories in my brain. So it was very much that she just thought, this is the same environment. It just, maybe I don't have the smells or the noises, but I'm still getting the mean teachers. I'm still getting the kind of whispering behind my back in terms of, DMs on the Zoom or whatever they were using. And it was just the same boring curriculum that she just really wasn't interested in following. And she's absolutely fascinated. Her specialist interest, because she's autistic, is horses, and so they just weren't covering the things that she was interested in learning about, and so we opted out of the online school for her too. So next we tried a homeschool group, because she'd had a great experience with homeschool groups before, with kind of cross-generation homeschool groups, and being very active outdoors. And in many respects, she kind of loved what they had on offer. She could cook outdoors, she could get involved with animals, and many different things. And the facilitators were all lovely. She absolutely adored working with them, but there were just too many little kids. And at that stage, she was kind of becoming a teenager, and really wanted to access kind of her peers, and there weren't any of her peer age group in this setting. So that made it very difficult for her. And also, she just doesn't really like working in groups. She finds like the social anxiety piece to be prohibitive for her. She much prefers to learn one-to-one, and that's how she learns best. So that was, we discovered that through this process. I'm happy to say that the homeschool group was just something we tried, but it wasn't in any way traumatic for her. So at that stage, I was beginning to tear my hair out. Like, what can I do? This is my area of expertise, but nobody really prepares you for like experiencing it yourself. So I got to reading. Some of these books I'd already read, but some of them I kind of really discovered. And I'm not gonna go through each individual one, but you might want to take a screen grab of this if you're looking for inspiration. All of these different books really talk about understanding children as humans, that they are not different from adults, that they have their own lives to lead, and then it's really important that our role as parents is supporting them to develop into the adults, that they're going to be those wonderful, unique adults, and that is our responsibility. It was when I read the PDA paradox that I realised that that's what I was facing. That my daughter has a PDA profile, and really helped to do some work with looking at Naomi Fisher's work on neurodiversity, self-directed education as well, and just realising that actually learning is something that children are pre-programmed to do. That's how even as we've evolved as humans, that age, that kind of adolescent age, has been one of learning for, far beyond when we first came up with sitting in a schoolroom in the 1850s. And so it's the most natural thing that a child can do, and often we get far too much in the way of their natural curiosities and learning. And this wonderful book, Your Child Is Not Broken, which is not something for the faint-hearted, because she does swear a lot, but it's a fantastic book about the current system and how we're being made to feel like our children are broken when actually they're just wonderful however they are. So here are some of the key quotes that really helped me on my journey. Big thanks goes up to Ellie Costello, who was a huge support for me when I was going through this process, and reminded me that it's okay for it to take time. Whilst you might be told that every moment, every minute of school missed is a catastrophe, and have posters up about that in school, I can tell you firsthand it's really not. And actually, children need time without any pressure to heal from the trauma that they've experienced in school. So thank you, Ellie, for that. It was hugely important to me. And Ellie is a leader of an organisation called Square Peg, and also is part of the Not Fine in School group on Facebook, which has got, I think, almost 80,000 members. So if you're not on that Facebook group and you want some support, get on there. It's fantastic. And Square Peg are huge advocates for a more neuro-inclusive future. And I'm one of the advisors for Square Peg as well. Also Naomi Fisher, hats off to her. I've had a number of conversations with her and on podcasts we've done together, etc. Kind of unlearning, as a trained teacher, unlearning the role of education within society, and helping me to understand that there's not necessary to measure children's progress in learning. There just really isn't any. They're going to be learning. That's what they're pre-programmed to do. Why do we need to measure it? And why is that important? It's only important if we're wanting to kind of measure them against each other, compare them, individualize them, but actually they're part of a society, so it's not actually that beneficial. Controversial there, but it really helped me to question some of the things that I had always believed to be true about education. And then there was the wonderful Helen Wright, who I was put in contact with from a colleague who also has a daughter with PDA, with a PDA profile, I should say. And she just spoke to me about her experiences and helped me to understand that we are led by her needs. And if that means changing tutors until we find the right one, so be it. And Helen talked to me about how sometimes her daughter would just say, actually, no, I don't want to work with this person anymore because something's happened and I don't trust them anymore. And they'd have to move on and find another one. They'd have to go through all these people that didn't work and find another one. And that might only last for 6 months. But they continue to do that to find the right people for their daughter. And that just helped me to realize that the right person for Amelia is out there, but it's not everyone can teach Amelia, my daughter. So that was a really important part of our journey. So then we stumbled across this wonderful program that I want everyone to know about called Changing Lives Through Horses. It's a fantastic initiative by the British Horse Society, and it was being piloted by her local horse riding centre, where we had already been numerous times. She knew the instructors there, she trusted them, and they were able to offer her and one of her friends that she'd made there very small group tuition during this program. And so she's actually now got an MVQ level 1 as part of this, and she was 13 when she got that, and this year she's doing an MVQ level 2, so she's probably going to be one of the most highly qualified 14-year-olds in the country, because of this fantastic program which teaches the national curriculum through learning about horses. It's specifically designed for people who hyperfocus on horses and have that specialist interest. So it's out there if you do also have a child that's interested in horses, but I'm sure there are other programs for other specialist interests out there as well. You just really have to dig hard to find them, because no local authority is going to tell you about them, unfortunately. We also done lots of, well, she has done, I haven't done them, she has done lots of self-directed learning projects. She told me that as soon as I tell her what to do. She doesn't want to do it anymore because that's her PDO profile. So I have been amazed to see her just to sit back and watch her learning through TikTok, through YouTube, all these places that we're told are so damaging for children. She learned how to make butter, and I was like, oh goodness, I don't know if I want to even try this. It was the most delicious butter I've ever tried in my entire life. It was so good. She'd followed the instructions, followed the recipe, measured it all out herself, and made a fantastic product at the end. And then more recently, she had a fall off her pony and broke her collarbone. And instead of just wallowing in self-pity, she decided she was going to teach herself to crochet, and she's crocheted this ginormous blanket. She finished it a couple of days ago, and she's learned these incredible skills. So she is learning. Her brain is on fire learning, but it just doesn't look the same as learning the national curriculum. But I am just thrilled to report that's what's been going on for her. And as we move into her kind of middle adolescence, we're discussing what the future looks like for her. And she wants to work with horses. She's really clear about that. So that's her specialist interest. And I really, really want to support her with that. She's looking forward to going to college. We luckily have a college down the road from us, a rural setup where they do an equine course. So she can access that when she's 16. They used to allow 14-year-olds to go, but ironically, they cut the funding for that. So she can't go until she's 16, which is very, very sad. But then she's going to see where it takes her. She might want to go into equine physio or something like that. But, you know, there's absolutely no reason why she can't do that. We just need to get her some GCSEs because that is the thing that will hold her back from going to university. So she does have to get that. So we're working with the council at the moment. I don't know, working with the council, but we are fighting the council at the moment to try and get an EHCP for her, to get the tuition at home that meets her needs so that she can get English, maths and science GCSEs, which is what she needs in order to be able to access the courses she wants to do at university. So there is a different way. It's not easy, definitely not easy, but there are many of us out there do that. And do not let people gaslight you into thinking that you are harming your child or limiting their options, because actually you're probably broadening them by giving them more options and letting them follow what they are interested in if you follow the self-directed learning approach. But be led by them. They know themselves best. That's my advice. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Victoria. Thank you so much for sharing that very personal journey. And I think, you know, I can sit here and talk a lot about the theory, but hearing how this plays out, I think is amazing. And hopefully, I mean, I know I find it very inspirational myself. That has really helped you understand how this could kind of work in practice. So Victoria has touched on quite a few approaches. So, and as you saw, not all of them do work. So I am going to talk you through a few of the common models and approaches you can take. Because not everyone will follow the same path or will want the same model might not suit them. So let's, okay. All right. Okay, so alternative models of education. So why now? So why has there been a huge rise in kind of learning from home and other alternative models in recent years? I mean, when you do look at the government statistics, I think that it's doubling each year at the moment. So I think, I mean, there's so many different reasons why this could be happening. I think a really, really important one we have covered is that there's more knowledge now on neurodivergence. There's a lot of books to read. I think parents are realizing their children do not fit into this box, into this mold, and are not thriving as a result. I mean, it could be, you know, be based on many other things. COVID and health anxieties pulled a lot of children away from school, and then reintegration was difficult. Some people might do it because of, you know, religious and educational philosophies, and just, wanting to take control of their child's education, or seeing their child as unhappy and giving them the opportunity to thrive, and the courage, I think, to it's a very bold, it's viewed by many as a bold step. So yes, but as you can see from what Victoria said, are really it can have incredible outcomes. So, so how do you begin the process of kind of learning from home, homeschooling? Um, so you may or may not be aware, you are not legally obliged to have your child attend school, mainstream education. We would highly recommend that you talk to the school, obviously, before you just whip them out. So, talk as much to, the head of departments, then go and see, if you can kind of unpick what's going on. And as Victoria said, if the trust is not there, if you cannot see, if the child, again, following what your child is saying, if they cannot attend that setting, then yeah, we begin there looking at alternative models. So again, informing the local authority is a great idea. I don't think it's a legal requirement, but what is a legal requirement is they may ask you for proof that you are implementing something at home to help them thrive and function in society. So that could be anything from taking pictures, creating a really small journal, not nothing, not huge amount of documentation, but just enough to show what's been going on at home. And as you can see from Victoria's amazing presentation, does not have to follow the curriculum at all. Okay. So again, there are many different ways this can be done. So I think when many of us think about home education, we have this image similar to this lady here that you might take full control of your child's program. You would literally replicate the school in the home environment, have a timetable, and implement, teach academic subjects, creative subjects, and almost mimic the school in the household, and with you as the teacher. And again, you can tailor that to very specific needs. So that is one way it can be done. Obviously, this can be, especially in the context of PDA, neurodivergence, a very emotional space, and it's not practical for every family. But this is, I guess, what we commonly think of when we talk about homeschooling. This is flexi schooling. Is something that I've had a few clients do with their school. It's not, the school is not legally obliged to honor this or to go through with this. So it's quite if you do feel your child may be sensitive to the school environment or at risk of school refusal, it can be a really great idea to discuss with the school first. Do you offer kind of flexi schooling? And this essentially is just a mixture of classroom-based learning and then allowing the child to come home for parts of the school day. So it may be there are certain subjects that are incredibly triggering. Often it's maths and science tend to come up a lot. But just to be clear, in school they will follow the national curriculum, and at home, again, that they can pursue interests that do not follow the curriculum. So yeah, this can be a great approach if your child just would like the intensity of school. If stepping down that intensity really kind of helps them move forward. Okay, so and another thing Victoria discussed, you may want to switch it to online or in-person support from professionals. So you might want to get tutors like we have at the CODE, or coaches like they have at Connections in Mind, or even online schools like Minerva's Virtual Academy is one example. And as Victoria said, this can be something which may or may not work. If your child does not like the structure of school, then this again may not be something which honors them and makes them feel regulated and thrive. It may not work. I mean, what can be helpful with tutors, coaches, and mentors is that they can make the approach a little bit more personal than an online school. But again, it is very, very important to have the right tutor and the right bond. As we've talked about the sensitivities surrounding, you know, social rejection, shaming, you know, trust, like this really has to be quite a special bond. And again, it does not have to be to mimic an entire school day. You know, it doesn't have to be you know, so 6 hours of, you know, tuition each day. It can be, you know, pursuing GCSEs or the national curriculum, or it can be just learning about, you know, we've got an amazing tutor who's writing a play with a guy who was in year 9 at home. Um, ah, Again, self-directed learning. So this is an incredible, and it's something which, again, it's a real leap of faith. If you have not had the chance to listen to Victoria's moving podcast with Naomi Fisher, I had goosebumps driving listening to that. It's incredible. It's really an innovative approach championed by leading figures in education. And it's really, Victoria explained it beautifully, where children are encouraged to learn at home, to follow their initiative. And it's a very empowering kind of child-led approach. So you're not enforcing them to do any particular activities. You're following their interests, and you may guide them, and you may, you know, help them to put that into action. But yeah, it's essentially leading them the way they want to go. And it often, yeah, like Victoria has said, it may be that yes, eventually they go at their own pace and they'd love to go to university, and then GCSEs can be reintroduced later on. I think it's kind of the unlearning. So feeling safe to learn again, and having a really positive association with learning. The books are fascinating. I don't have enough time to talk about them all now, but I mean, I thoroughly recommend reading, especially any of the Naomi Fisher books, as she goes into a lot of detail about not only the theory behind this, but what families have experienced. And of course, you have other types of kind of non-traditional schools. We have Steiner schools. So they're less academic. So they're based, they have the head, heart, and hands kind of mantra. So it's a lot more kind of creative learning, a lot more, it's very practical. It kind of, it's not so much of a traditional classroom setting. They do have teachers leading learning. It's not as child-led as Montessori and self-directed learning, but it is a lot more creative. And you know, they do have GCSEs and A levels introduced, but yeah, it's more suited. Whoops, sorry. More suited to certain like children, especially those who are neurodivergent. Forest school. I know many of you might have experiences with younger children, but again, this can go all the way up to you know, 18. And again, is a lovely way to like learn in a forest setting. And learn a multitude of physical skills. So using, you know, physicality and exploring nature, and again, a very child-led approach. Montessori. Really, again, very similar principles to self-directed learning, and without kind of meaning to infantilize the process. You know, many of you may have had children attend nursery, and you know that they have the station set out, and someone's guiding the children around those. That's a really good way to visualize this, is that, you know, resources are provided. It's more child-led, but with a kind of a teacher guiding that process. So these could be other schools that may work. They can be difficult, you know, to apply. Do your research, see what, you know, what your local schools are like, but some of them are absolutely fantastic. I can see the questions popping up, and I will make sure we do leave the time to answer them. So I just wanted to address, before we finish up, a few of the common myths. This is something which, when I do suggest removing children from school, these are questions that always come up. The first one is won't my child be lonely when they lack socialization? Won't that have an impact on them in the long term? Actually, the opposite is true. And depending on where you are and where you live, like alternative education can offer an abundance of opportunities for social connection. If that's what your child, wants to do. Yeah, and there's some recent research that suggests that now they're looking at children who are homeschooled, and they do report very high quality friendships and relationships and do thrive socially later in life. I mean, this can, like Victoria experience, you can have homeschool groups locally. You can also enroll your child in sports club, any extracurricular interests. I think that the kind of shared interest in those clubs means that, yes, that they are more likely to kind of develop a connection. Also, I think the presence of adults and the atmosphere of trust means that there are less kind of antisocial behaviors, less bullying, and because ultimately you have less dysregulated children. Okay. Um, Common myth two, my child will be bored and end up sitting around not doing anything. So again, the opposite is often true. So I think Victoria's story beautifully gave us an example of this, that alternative education can boost motivation and engagement. I think the very individualized pace, the focusing back on their special interests. I think often we see it, gaming is a very common one, or doom scrolling on phones. And, we see this little guy here looking very bored. That can happen when children enter a freeze state. So it's part of the fight or flight model, fight, flight, freeze or fawn, and just disengaging. And that's not because they are just low motivation and do not want to engage in anything. It's because they do not feel heard, and they're not being able to access the curriculum, or they're not able to. So you often find when you allow for a personalized curriculum or a child-led learning approach, the engagement is incredible. Okay, lastly, common myth three, this will be expensive and I will have to quit my job. Yeah, I mean, it is you can implement this in many different ways. I myself, earlier on in my career, actually working with Victoria, we headed up a team of tutors and recreated a mini school for a client who had a lot of resources to do that. But equally, I've spoken to clients who've done this in a really limited budget. There's a whole range of things you can do. I mean, you can include tuition. You can include, tutors, coaches, and mentors are expensive. A less expensive option is a study buddy, someone who can kind of sit with your child and monitor them, as long as correct safeguarding has been that it's someone you trust and has the safeguarding standards needed. And there are local groups, activities. I work with one family. He has tuition in the morning and goes and does all his clubs and activities in the afternoon. So there are so many ways around this. And yeah, so please, you're very free. I mean, I'll go back and kind of answer some questions now and see if Victoria has any insights as well. But if you do want a discovery call with me and you find out a little bit more about how we can support you, please do book in with me for a free call. And we do have some amazing specialist tutors that, as a good school guide so kindly said, can be complete game changers. So yes, fantastic. So I can see some questions popping up. Let me just stop the screen share. Okay, so and Victoria, if you have any insights on this as well, let's go down and see. So I think a lot of them are some really helpful
Yeah, there's a couple that I've pulled out of the chat as well. But Cara's one is a really interesting one. Cara, thank you. This is often a question we get from teachers. It all sounds very well if a child is high functioning, but how do you support someone with complex needs? And I really do believe that we can still be child-led, even if a child has complex needs. They'll always have an interest that we can kind of grab onto and support. So I would say throw it back to the students themselves, speak to the parents if you can, speak to the students, find out what their interests are, what they would have liked to have done more of, what they liked, what they didn't like about it, and work with that. I'm always a proponent of universal design for learning, which is where you're constantly consulting with stakeholders, finding out what their barriers to engagement in learning were, and then designing to remove those barriers. And it's a really simple process, but it's a continuous process that's always ongoing. So Cara, I'd throw it back to you and ask the students and the parents themselves to give you that, because you cannot design for the complexities of humanity without meeting the needs of the individuals in front of you. Super. That's mine. Could you, I don't know if you want to come in with that one on that one, Cara, for Cara, Paula?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, I think, it's really very, very bespoke, and it really does require, professionals looking into kind of every aspect of what's going on. I mean, EHCP plans are absolutely kind of critical for understanding, yeah, how to adjust the environment. But it is, at the moment there is such a need for, more training, more funding. But yeah, I think you covered it pretty fully there. Just having a little look down. Okay, so yeah, so I absolutely, I've seen there's a couple of comments from Josephine. Hi Josephine. Yes, no, this can seem so so kind of far reached and like ideal, especially if you're in the middle of a very traumatic experience. I mean, Victoria, you've probably been in a similar mindset, I guess to Josephine.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wonder what you.
Yeah. So just to fill everyone in, because I don't think you necessarily all seen this, because Josephine was messaging us to the host and the panelists, so I don't know if you'll have seen that. But
Okay.
so Josephine's question was, it seems really unrealistic what we're talking about, saying and saying that if a child has PDO profile, they don't want to do anything, then they're just going to sit there on Taylor Swift videos all day. Now, it can feel like that. I remember going through that stage with Amelia, and getting the advice from all those incredible professionals that I got. And actually, if you can lean into the discomfort of going through that stage, they will come out the other side. And then you need to be led by their interest. Okay, so if they're really interested in Taylor Swift, great. She's like actually a great role model, right? What can we do to put learning opportunities in place so that they can learn about her history and things that she's passionate about, go off and do projects in that. But again, being really led by them. And that means really completely moving away from any type of curriculum. You're not going to get a child with PDA to follow a curriculum. It just doesn't work like that unless it has to be something that they're interested in. So it's about creating self-directed learning. Is all about recognizing learning as it happens and recording that. You don't have to record that, but sometimes the local authority will want you to record that so that you've got details of that. That's why I have those photos of the butter and the blanket and all this kind of stuff. So I've got my evidence that she is learning and she's doing project work, but it doesn't have to look like school. And if you're looking for a kind of handbook of how to do that, that self-directed learning book by Naomi Fisher, it's got everything you need in there. It's fantastic. And it is a completely different way of thinking about it. And no, you won't be able to get a child with PDA to do what you want them to do, because in there, they need their autonomy. They need their control over their life. So that would be my advice, Josephine. I know it's hard.
Absolutely. And I feel that, PDA, like, I think that's why, despite, yeah, me kind of guiding you guys through all the different models, Victoria reflected on perhaps why that hadn't worked for you. So it really does. It's about leaning into that discomfort, and yeah, trusting that the child, when they feel safe to learn and are allowed to take that initiative, you can see some really wonderful things happen. Um, but
We've
yes.
got one more, just before we finish up, I do want to make sure we get to that one, which is about a child who wants to attend school but is struggling with anxiety and unable to regularly attend lessons. So with this one, again, it comes back to that, like, what's the barrier? So at Connections in Mind, we have a process we call WOOP, which is to do with mental contrasting. And it's constantly about finding out, okay, if they'd wish to go to school, that's the thing that they want to do. And they can visualize what it would be like to be in school where they didn't feel anxious. Then they need to think about what are the obstacles, what's the thing that's getting in the way? Is it peer friendships? Is it the way that the teachers speak to them? Is it the workload? What is it that's getting in the way? Try to find that out by asking lots of open-ended questions. And then when you've got to the bottom of what it really is, because it may not be the surface thing that first comes up, it might be something very much deeper than that, then you can work on that and remove that barrier. But that's the way to do it. Now we can, Paula's got some fantastic tutors at the CODE. We also have coaches at Connections in Mind. We can do that work with a young person to find out what's getting in the way and then come up with some strategies as well. That would be my response.
Absolutely. And I mean, we triage, so we will pass clients back. We can work out between us what is better support, a coach or a tutor. And I think it's really, it's really important, I think, to protect yourselves and take yourselves out of that emotional space sometimes, because it can seem when, like, when you as a parent are telling the child, it's even more of an emotional war zone than it is a third party professional that they may have been able to um connect with in some way, because you don't want to be stuck in that place with your child. But yeah, I hope this today has given people some hope. Victoria's moving story, I think, is such a lovely thing to hear alongside all the theoretical stuff and theoretical content we're talking about. But thank you everyone for joining today. Thank you, Victoria. And any questions, please email me, and I will also be sending out. Oh, we'll also be sending, they'll be on our website, free PDF resources, and a recording of this if you'd like to come back to it.
Wonderful.
Okay.
Well, thank you everyone for all your comments and the wonderful stories that I've seen coming up in the chat. It's so important to know we're not alone in this journey. So thank you all for attending. Thank you for your input, and be strong for your young people. Yeah.
God. Thank you guys. Have a lovely evening. Thanks, Victoria. Bye. Bye.